You're listening to the Woman of Value podcast. You are about to hear the story of a woman who is following her dreams and passions and creating positive change in the world.
So he grabbed me, took me into his vehicle, and we started driving. And we kept driving, and as we're driving, he's screaming and yelling, saying, "How dare I do this? Our relationship was going so well. I've now just ruined it." Anyway, we got to an isolated area, and he saw a telephone booth. And he told me, "Harriet, you need to get out of the vehicle and say goodbye to your parents, and because this is the last time they'll ever hear from you."
Harriet Tinka was stabbed, kidnapped, and left for dead by a former boyfriend. She turned that horrifying experience into motivation to not only live her best life, but to inspire others. She has given hope to women who are faced with domestic violence like she was, and she is known as a powerhouse role model who makes being genuine the most powerful thing of all. She's an invigorating transformational speaker, a passionate life coach and blogger, a chartered professional accountant, and if that's not enough, she's also a football official and an ultra marathon runner. She's the founder and CEO of the award-winning social enterprise Empowered Me, whose mission is to inspire and empower girls and women. Harriet has received many awards, including the YWCA Woman of Distinction, the Global Woman of Vision, Afro Canadian Community Woman of the Year, Action for Healthy Communities Youth Empowerment Award, and many others. She is a tireless philanthropist and a Toastmaster Divisional Champion, just like I was. And Harriet feels blessed to have her journey supported by her partner, Steve, and her 3 children, Tristan, Rihanna, and Aaliyah. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Sandy, for having me. I'm very, very excited. Thank you.
I'm excited to have you back. So I will put a post in the show notes with a link to your show on Last First Date Radio on my other podcast when you appeared with Dr. Alan Leica and talked about your book. But today we're focusing on you and your journey to get here where you are after overcoming such incredible obstacles to live the empowered life that you have today. So let's begin with a woman of value. What does that mean to you?
A woman of value, first of all, you have to start with yourself. You have to look at yourself, who you are, and what is it that you're here for. So when I think of a woman of value, I think of myself as somebody who is absolutely in love with myself, so much so that I can go out there and share my experiences, my value, my beliefs, my integrity with other people, so I can also help them be the truest version of themselves. So that's what I see when I see a woman of value.
Be the truest version of themselves. And you've certainly come a long way. So I know you started as a model, right? So tell us a little bit about, you're accomplishing fantastic things right now, but it wasn't always this way. So give us a glimpse into how you stepped into your value, how you realized you needed to make a change, and what you've done to do that.
Oh, you bet. So I started off, like you said, as an international model. It was, my family came from Kenya. So I'm originally from Kenya. So we came to Canada when my parents just decided, okay, we're not gonna really move forward because there's 7 of us in the family, and there wasn't any universities to accommodate all 7 of us. So they said, we'll come to Canada and get a formal education. So when we came, it was culture shock to begin with, just having that whole different culture coming to Canada. Anyway, just to make a long story short, we adjusted. And one afternoon, I was working with my mother, and a lady asked me if I wanted to be an international model. My mother didn't know what that was, and she wondered, oh, what is this international modeling thing? Anyway, the conversation kept going on, and eventually she allowed me to become an international model. However, she said, when you're done the modeling thing, she called it, you have to go and get a formal education. And I modeled for over 10 years. I got my fix, as she called it, and I had a lot of experiences. My self-esteem went up and down depending on what exactly was going on. So thereafter, I did as I promised my parents. I went to university, and it was there that I met a fellow student who, to me, I was excited to meet somebody who really cared. He was so fond of me. He would always do everything that I wanted. And I thought to myself, everybody should have a friend like him. But as time went on, I noticed that he was beginning to be very, very abusive. He would yell and scream, and it would always make me feel insignificant. But later on, he would apologize and say, I didn't mean to do that. So I forgave him. And I thought, okay, it's okay now. He's apologized. Life is good. So I accepted his ways. However, it just got worse and worse. He would just always stalk me. I would go with my friends who get very upset. And it got to a point where it was so frightening that I went to the university campus and I said, this person is really stalking me. What can I do? They told me there's absolutely nothing they can do because nothing has happened. It's my word against his. The only thing they can do is give me a restraining order. And in case your listeners don't know what that is, it's something that you can have that the other person that doesn't legally cannot come near you. So when I got that, I was excited. I was like, oh, this is good. So life went on. I kept on with my life. However, one evening I was at the university studying and I looked at time, it was late. So I quickly put my books in my knapsack, went home. Now, the university wasn't too far from my house and I was busy looking in my bag, looking for my keys, not really worried about what's around me. I was just focusing on just going to go home and go to sleep. Anyway, as I got into the elevator, I felt somebody grab me by my neck and squish it really tight. And it was him. He said, how dare you get a restraining order against me? Don't you know that I'm the only man in the world who would ever love you? I love you more than anything. So I was so scared and I started to scream. So he was frightened that I was really making so much noise. He didn't want anybody to hear me scream. So he quickly took his shoes off and got his socks off and stuffed them in my mouth to silence me. So he grabbed me, took me into his vehicle, and we started driving. And we kept driving, and as we're driving, he's screaming and yelling, saying, how dare I do this? Our relationship was going so well. I've now just ruined it. Anyway, we got to an isolated area, and he saw a telephone booth. And he told me, Harriet, you need to get out of the vehicle and say goodbye to your parents, and because this is the last time they'll ever hear from you. And I looked at him and I said, no. And he was quite surprised that I said no to him. And he said to me, Harriet, I'm going to ask you one more time. Get out of the car and call your parents. In the back of my vehicle, I have a rope, a knife, and gasoline. I am going to take your body and wrap it all up, cut your body in pieces, put gasoline on it, and nobody will ever find you. Now, are you willing to get out of here and go call your parents? I said no. And he got so angry at the second no. So he quickly reached over me, grabbed a knife from the glove compartment, and he stabbed me 2 times on my leg, and there was blood gushing everywhere. Now, even today, I have absolutely no idea how I got from that point to the hospital. Because when I woke up, I looked around and there was my father and the doctor, and the police had been waiting in the waiting room. And the doctor told my father that I may never walk again, or if I do, it will be very difficult because the stab wound was so deep, it had chipped my bone and I had bled to death. So when I had the news, I was in shock. There I was, an international model, walking the runways full of confidence. And now I was a cripple and I was depressed. And the only thing that separated me from the confidence and depression was my trauma. So I started to feel sorry for myself. I kept saying, why me? How could this happen? I'm a wonderful person. You know, you start to question yourself when you go through these sort of things. And I thought to myself, all these questions are doing me no good. I had to go and start healing. So I started my physiotherapy. And it was during my therapy that I met a little girl who came into my life. She had she was in a wheelchair. She found me in a waiting room, and she asked me why I was there. I talked to her, gave her my story in a version that a 9-year-old could understand. So when she had my story, she looked at me and said, Harriet, you need to use your story to go make a difference, because your story is so powerful. And it was from a 9-year-old. She also told me what her story was. But life is about connecting the dots. At that point, I had absolutely no idea what she meant. And it was later on that I figured out what she meant. And I used my story as a purpose to make an impact in the world. So I met Dr. Leica, who was also, he was also going through, and I met him at an event. I can share that with you later on. But anyway, I used my story through using a book to really empower women, to let them know you don't have to share your story, but you have to know that you're not alone. So my goal is to give women hope who have going through what I went through, so that they can know they are not alone.
Mm. Wow. And I've heard parts of your story, but never the whole thing. And it's just so harrowing to think about someone that scary to a person in university. I mean, you were a young woman. Who would suspect that somebody would want to kill you, And I always wondered about why he would stop at a phone booth. And I mean, for anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's how we used to make phone calls.
That's right, yeah. I know people they don't exist anymore. And
no, they don't.
I had a cell phone at the time.
Right.
So what I found out, and I just found out this recently when I was going through my story through the police files, because I wanted to know exactly why I don't remember what happened from that point to that day. I still don't know. But I found out that he was recording the whole entire conversation. So he really wanted to kill me. And he had recorded the whole conversation that went on. I don't want to listen to what happened because I think it would be very traumatic. But the police have the records in case I ever want to listen to them.
Wow. So what happened to him? Did he serve prison time? Like what was the end result with him?
He got 3 months. That's it. Just 3 months.
Oh my, wow.
Yeah. That alone depressed me. Just knowing that he did all that. Attempted murder, I would say, but yet he only got 3 months.
And do you know if he's continued to do what he did? Like to hurt other people? I'm just curious about that.
I decided to just not even focus on him. I could easily check him out on Facebook or figure out where he is, but I decided there's no point. I am in a different place right now. What happened in the past happened in the past. But I'm hoping that he learned his lesson from me and he got help and is not doing it to any other woman, because it's not okay.
It's so not okay. And and I totally understand why you wouldn't want to keep traumatizing yourself. I mean, even telling the story, I'm sure is, brings up everything each time. Like how is it for you when you keep retelling? Does it open the trauma or does it feel like something else?
Actually, it's very therapeutic talking about it. But what I found interesting is when I went online and Googled my story and I actually read the story, I felt it did something for me. I felt like my heart was sinking. It was almost like I was reliving the moment that it happened, because the editor that wrote the story was so explicit. And I was like, oh my goodness, I was young then. I didn't really know. And I was a typical domestic violence victim. I was young, naive, and I didn't really know the signs of an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
So reading that made me think, oh my goodness, am I really over it? But I think I am. And talking about it really helps. If I can help one woman or even more than one woman, I think my job is done.
Yeah, and I know you have helped more than one, and many women who hear your story and really become empowered, because you not only survived, but you used your story to grow and to create the career that you have now, which is so meaningful. So tell us, like, how did that evolve, the career that you have? Tell us, because you're doing so many things, philanthropist and football and everything else.
I have so when I after my healing process, I was invited by a lot of modeling agencies in the city. They said, "Oh, Harriet, you are an international model. Can you come to our agency and teach these young girls how to walk?" And I thought, oh, wow, I felt so honored. So I started teaching in modeling school, teaching these girls how to walk, and men as well. And then after a while, I realized this wasn't good for these young women, because it was actually impacting the self-esteem. Because here they were thinking, oh, I'm going to become a model. I'm going to have the life that I've always meant to have. But at the end of the day, first of all, it's a very difficult career to really pursue. And the other thing, when you're in the modeling industry, you're not always told you're beautiful. In fact, if you don't have a strong self-esteem, it's going to make it even worse. So when I taught at in these modeling schools, I decided, okay, this is not what I want to do with these young girls. Everybody wants to feel like a model, but not everybody needs to be a model. So I opened up my own business called Empowered Me. And Empowered Me is about empowering young women to be the truest version of themselves. So I ignite these young ladies to rise up and get rid of their limiting beliefs. And the program I call it the power of 12. So in the program, I have the power of self-esteem, the power of communication, setting your goals, diversity and inclusion, the power of poverty. So there's like 12 of them. I can't go through all of them. But basically, I teach them the non-cognitive skills that are not taught in school, that are not measurable, like things like leadership, grit, attitude, social skills, all of those things. They come into the program and I teach them how to love themselves unconditionally and be themselves on purpose so that they can have value.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what I think people don't realize is that there are skills involved in all of these things. Like, most of us were not brought up to know, first of all, to know our worth, and I have been talking a lot about the importance of responsibility in children, especially young children. We really are in a time period where many parents are enabling children, where they are doing too much for them and not really trusting. Really, that, to me, that's what that says. You don't really trust or empower your child to make mistakes, to learn on their own. And I'm lucky enough to have learned all of these things before my kids were fully grown, and so that I made mistakes, but I'm much better at parenting now that I've done my own inner work. And I have children who remind me all the time, you know what, Mom, let me make the mistakes. Stop telling me what to do.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, no, I'm so grateful for that. And I think that, we need to not be afraid to fail. And I know that for me, the public speaking part was really so much about fear of failure and fear of criticism.
Yeah.
So you went through Toastmasters, and yeah, tell us what that taught you, and why did you join Toastmasters?
Oh, I wasn't. I was one of those people who are afraid of public speaking, and people are often surprised that, oh, you are an international model, you're walking in the runway. How can you be afraid of public speaking? I don't know, I just was.
Easy.
I couldn't explain it. So what I did, I decided, actually a friend of mine invited me to go to a Toastmaster meeting, and I didn't know what Toastmaster was. I had no idea. I thought it was about people drinking and toasting wine or something. Just the name didn't really, it wasn't, it didn't really say what exactly they do. So when I started the Toastmaster, I was actually quite impressed by the club. People were so supportive. There's evaluation. It's basically helps you to be a better communicator, a better speaker, and how to receive feedback without even taking it personally. So for me, I found it was very helpful. And I'm also a keynote speaker. So that also helped me when I go do presentation, or when I go to schools and teach girls how to love themselves, how to talk about not being bullied, all those things. So it really taught me a lot of skills, and I could really recommend Toastmaster to anybody. And that's a little plug for them. But for me, it's the biggest investment. And I know Warren Buffett has often said, the biggest investment you can make for yourself is in yourself. And he often talks about this Carnegie public speaking course that he took. So for him, he found it really, really useful. And for myself, I think it's essential for everybody to have that public speaking skill, especially for young kids.
I so agree with you. I've tried to get Toastmasters into schools because I didn't get any public speaking support as a kid. And I was so afraid of being on a stage, being part of a play, anything that required me to get in front of people. And what I realized as I did this work was that I was just afraid of being judged, and I wanted to be perfect. And when you are afraid of being judged and you want to be perfect, you cannot be yourself. You cannot overcome your fears because you're constantly criticizing yourself, let alone what anybody else will say about you.
Yeah.
But also, you really stay small if you don't use your voice. And not everybody has to be in front of a camera and have a podcast and be on a podcast.
That's right.
But we all have the ability to rise up. And I think that, you know, being able to also compete in contests. I'm curious what was your speech about, the winning speech?
Oh, let me see if I remember. Oh yes, it was basically I called it I have so many. I'm trying to think the one that I almost won, the one that I won. Oh, okay, yes, it was it was actually trying to remember the title on top of my head, because I've done two. One of them was about You're Enough, and it was about letting go of your past and not living with the past. So it was actually I came in, when I came in for the presentation, I was carrying a big sack of garbage. And I said, we all walk around with a bag of our past and you don't want to let it go. So you need to let go of your past and live the life that you're meant to. So it's basically, it was a sharing to the world that your past is your past. Focus on your future and let it go. So it was actually it made people laugh, it made people cry, because I talked about how the first thing is about my university, how to get my designation as a chartered professional accountant. I failed the first time, I failed the second time, and the third time I did it, and I made fun saying, I don't know why I would be hired after failing 3 times. So that was another thing. And I talked about some of the failures when I did a Toastmaster competition, and I was number 2, and then I became number 2 and number 2, and eventually I won. So it's also failure. Like, failure are lessons of what you do. And then I talked about how in my third, after my second pregnancy, my husband left me. So I had to really figure it out on my own at the time. So all these negatives, all these failures, how I overcame it, to show you that you have to forgive the past, because if you don't forgive, you will not move on. So it was a lot of life stories. I wish I could present my speech to you now. It was a beautiful speech.
Oh, it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear it sometime. Maybe you can, do you have a link to it? Maybe we can share it in the show notes if you have a video.
I'll have to find it, because somebody recorded it, but I don't think I'll send it to you if I find it. Yeah.
Okay, great. No, and it sounds like these are all themes that, first of all, they resonate with me. I'm sure they'll resonate with many of our listeners, that we do often feel very trapped by our past or by our circumstances. And we think this is just the way it is. You know, I was born this way, or my parents were this way, and so it's just the way it's got to be. And, you know, and when you realize that you have options, that you can actually create a different future by really making peace with your stories and realizing what you can do differently, it's so empowering. And that's what you stand for.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is forgiveness, because especially what I went through, the biggest thing is forgiving your past. And we're told by all the experts, you need to forgive right away so that you can heal. And forgiveness is difficult. It's easy maybe if you're driving and somebody cuts you off, or maybe your friend is late and you're supposed to meet a certain time and they didn't show up, or whatever the reason. That's easy to forgive. But when something traumatic, like what happened to me, or something happens to your child, it's hard to forgive. And forgiveness is really, it's not a natural emotion. We're not born to forgive. We're born to hate. So what I found is I had to use hate to learn to forgive. And when people say, I don't want to hate, that's not me. But what they're saying is, I don't want to get angry, because anger is reactive. It's just throwing things around. It's out of control. Hate is an emotion that we use to protect what we love. For example, I can say, I hate cancer because it's killing my father. So I'm using hate to remind myself of the love I have for my father. So when I had to forgive, I used 3 steps. So number 1, I had to write down on a piece of paper why I hate. I hate my stalker because he put me in the hospital. I hate my stalker because he put a scar on my leg. And then step number 2, change the second sentence with love. I hate my stalker, but I love being healthy. I hate my stalker, but I love my perfect imperfections. And then step number 3, get rid of the hate and focus on the love. I love being healthy. I love my perfect imperfection. I love my family. So after that, you do it 2 or 3 times a day, in the morning and afternoon. I love being healthy. I love my perfect imperfection. I love my family. So it becomes a love journal. And you can even do it every day. You can even add other things that you love. I love playing with my children, whatever it is. So now you've gotten rid of the hate, and now you're focusing on forgiveness. Because if you don't forgive, it's really basically, and it's a cliche people always say, but it's true. It's like drinking poison and having the other person die from it. So it's really something. And when I'm talking to my students, I usually like to share short stories, because stories stick. So I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the story of the snake and the saw. Have you ever heard that story? So no. I can share with you if you'd like.
Okay.
So it's basically the snake walks into a carpenter's workshop, and this carpenter leaves his saw everywhere. So as the snake walks in, the saw kind of cuts the snake, and the snake gets really upset, and he thinks that the saw is attacking him. So he turns around and bites the saw, and then he gets cut again. Now the snake gets really angry, and he wraps himself around the saw, and he ends up cutting himself, and eventually he dies. And this is a true story. So it's just basically, it's like, if you don't forgive, it's the same thing. You're fighting these demons, and you're the one that's really cutting yourself. So you have to be really mindful of forgiving yourself. Don't let it in. Just let go of the pain and just forgive for yourself so you can heal.
Oh, that's a great story, and a great way to remember what is the pain of not forgiving. Mm-hmm. It's also interesting that you use the word hate, because I see anger in the same way that you see hate. Mm-hmm. I think most people's experience with anger is chaotic, and it's out of control, like you said. And I think that anger is showing up to tell us what we love and what we want to protect, just the same way that hatred is. It's funny, because hatred to me feels harder to say than anger. It feels harder to feel than anger.
Yeah, but it's a natural emotion. And if you look at it in Wikipedia, the definition of hate is an intense dislike for something or someone. So that's what it is. Now, anger is more like it lashes out, it's reactive, it's chaotic, like you said. So that's when people talk about hate versus anger, the emotions are pretty much very similar. They're related, but one kind of protects you. As human beings, we use hate to protect ourselves. Like you see, if you see a little deer, when he sees you, is like a little bit scared. So that fear doesn't mean it hates you. It's just we use emotions to protect ourselves. So hate, you use that to protect things that you love. But just the name, as in the word hate has been, and I'm not trying to advocate the word hate, but it's just, as humans, we need to own what we feel. But it's just what we do with how we feel is the biggest key.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Mm-hmm. So Harriet, what are you creating now in your business? Like, what are you excited about?
Oh, I'm excited with all the workshops that I do with the young girls and young women, because everything that I do is very visual, because I find a lot of people, you can go there and give them theories. You can say self-esteem is about loving yourself, and you have your self-worth, the self-series, self-acceptance, self-worth. So what I do in my program is very unique. Everything that I talk about, I will show them. For example, I'll tell women, you need to have your self-worth no matter what. So that's just a sentence. So what I'll do, I'll bring in a $20 bill, and I'll ask my group, who wants this $20 bill? Of course, everybody wants it. And I'll take the $20 bill and I'll crumble it. I'll throw it on the ground. I'll dump some water on it. And then I'll ask the group, who wants this $20 bill? Everybody still wants it. And I ask them, why is that? And they tell me, because it did not lose its worth. It still has its value. So I tell them, you just proved something. You're going to go through a lot of things in your life. You're going to get crumbled up. You're going to get stepped on. Things are going to happen to you. But at the end of the day, you do not lose your self-worth. You're still you still have value. So don't ever forget that. So it's always things like that I teach the young girls. And when it comes to self-esteem, I'll show them what self-esteem is. I'll use a treasure box and I'll say, this is the treasure box. This is what happens. So when you're all born, we are like an empty treasure box. As time goes on, if you get positive things, it goes into your treasure box. You keep putting things in your treasure box. When people say negative things, your treasure box starts getting empty and empty. But people can say things that are so hateful that you end up sealing your treasure box. So that's when you get low self-esteem. So now I teach them what they can do to open up that treasure box so things can go into your treasure box. And the first step I always advocate is gratitude. So I'm excited whenever you can get me going. I have so many things that I really share with the young girls. And also I have little things that I say for bullying. I have what I call, well, if somebody's bullying you, you just use the WITS program. I say, just WITS them. And then you may ask, what is WITS? So it's WITS, walk away. So that would be the first thing. Somebody is bullying you, walk away, because sometimes that works. Or ignore them when they're around you. Just ignore them. Whatever they're saying, just pretend it's not happening. And they'll disappear. So that sometimes that will work. Or sometimes somebody's bullying you, but they really don't understand where you're coming from. So talk it out. So that's what the T stands for, talk it out. And then if all three fail, seek help, because you've tried everything. Either talk to your teacher, talk to your parents, or a counselor. So it's all those things that I teach my students as well as women. So there's so many exciting things that I work with young girls and young women. And although I am empowering the young girls and women, I also do work with the boys, because if we're going to empower our girls, we need to empower boys as well. So I work with both too, but the core is women and girls.
That's great. I mean, I can see what a great teacher you are. You have so much passion. And I think having these really easy sound bites and easy ways to remember through story, through demonstration, helps it to sink in, and any way we can do that is fantastic. What about the future? What are you excited about for the future?
Oh, I'm excited about doing even more, because when I started doing this empowerment program, I thought it was just something I was going to just do, on the side, because I am a full-time, I'm also a chartered professional accountant. So I do that. So I was just before COVID happened, actually, I decided to say goodbye to that career and just focus on the empowerment. And it's been so exciting, and even doing it virtually, I've been able to reach so many people. So I'm excited that I'm going to have the opportunity to reach more people. And I want to make empowering girls go viral. So that's really my goal. I want that to go viral so women can go out there and just feel absolutely wonderful. Wake up every morning feeling fulfilled and just having their own fantastic life. So I'm super excited. It's awesome.
Yeah. When I was just listening to something about finding your purpose, and when you really are tapped in to what you should be doing in the world, like where you're really using your gifts, you wake up every day excited. And
you do. Yeah.
It's so exciting to meet people who are tapped in like that, because you can feel it, you can see it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
All right. So we're ready for the lightning round where I'm going to ask you a bunch of rapid questions and just
Oh,
to give me some quick answers. Are you ready?
all right. I feel like I'm in a class writing an exam. All right, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Gandhi.
All right. I used to think I wasn't blank enough.
I used to think I was not good enough.
What was the number one thing holding you back from becoming a woman of value?
My limiting beliefs.
What's the best advice you can give to a woman who wants to become more empowered?
Believe in yourself and get rid of that. Make sure that how you talk to yourself in the most respectful way. And don't worry about the external dialogue. What other people are saying, don't let it in. Just love yourself unconditionally. Because if you feel so abundant and you love yourself completely, just imagine what you can do in the world. Be full of yourself. Not an egotistical way, though.
Yes, fill yourself up. I love it. What advice would you give to your younger self?
I would tell myself, ask more questions. Really ask the questions, because when you ask the questions, you get the answers and you can filter what makes sense to you, what is very valuable to you.
Good advice. So I've been throwing in another one, which I got from Brene Brown's podcast, which is
She's awesome.
She is awesome. What is something that people tend to get wrong about you?
Oh, I think one of the biggest things that because they see me all full of energy and all of that, but I also have my moments where I feel down in the dumps. So I am human too.
So they don't realize that you're human.
Yeah, that's right. Because I'm always about empowering other people. I'm always excited. I run marathons. I'm like ultra marathons, which is about 24-hour races. And I have attitude. I have everything that if you saw me, you'd think, oh my gosh, when does she stop? But I do have my moments where I need to reset. And I know how to do that.
Good. I'm glad you're human. Yeah. I was getting nervous.
Yeah. I'm a machine.
I know. No one wants to be with a machine. I mean, that's the thing. It's like we are attracted to people who are human because it gives us the empowerment to be more ourselves.
You bet, yeah.
So finally, Harriet, how would you like to be remembered?
Yeah, somebody once asked me that, and they said, I would like to, this is what I would like to be on my tombstone. As I lay down peacefully, my legacy is not completed. I want my legacy to keep going. I want people to continue empowering women. I want empowering women and young girls to go viral.
Great.
That is what I love.
I love it. Empowering women and girls?
And girls.
Yeah.
Empowering young girls and women to go viral. Because if you empower women and you empower girls, wow, the world is in a shock because nothing's going to happen but love. It's going to be filled with love. And because women, we nurture people. We are the nurturing from the beginning. And then we're the ones who bring the life, of course, not on ourselves, but we're the nurturing. So I want women to love themselves completely because that's going to show up in everything that they do with themselves and in people they touch one by one. I'm super excited.
I could see that. For any of you who are not watching the video, Harriet is practically jumping out of her seat.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such a pleasure. So you're invigorating me, and I'm feeling full of energy, which is always a good thing, right? When you're with somebody who's energetic and loves what they do and is doing good work, it fills us all up. So thank you, Harriet. Thanks for coming on the show and for inspiring us to be empowered, not let our past define us, but to create a better present and future.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been great. And just for your whole entire audience, I want them to know that we're all connected, but we're different. So think of yourself throwing a rock in water, in a paddle, in an ocean, in a lake and waterfall. It's going to react differently. But at the end of this day, we're all connected. So love yourself with your perfect imperfections. Thank you for having me, Sandy.
Thank you, Harriet.
If you would like to step more fully into your value, grab a free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Becoming a Woman of Value on my website, thewomanofvalue.com. Just click the link at the top of the homepage. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to click the subscribe button in your listening app. And if there's something in this episode that inspired you, please share it with others, because the more we share these inspirational stories, the more women of value we will have in this world. I'll see you next time.